各位观众，大家好，我是黄家华。芬太尼是一种用于医疗止痛和麻醉的药物，原本只出现在加护病房、开刀房，但现在它不再只是药。芬太尼开始出现在街头，它无声无息地夺走人们的性命。只要2毫克，大约是1粒盐的重量，就能让一个年轻人倒下，再也醒不过来。从2019年到现在，美国已经有超过30万人死于芬太尼相关药物过量。这个数字远远超过美国在越战中的死亡人数。光是2023年就有近8万人因此丧命，造成2.7兆美元的经济损失，占美国 GDP 的9.7%。医疗系统、社福网络、公共安全全都承受着沉重的压力。中央社特派记者团队横跨北美与中美洲，历时数月的走访调查，完成了芬太尼系列专题报道。我们将从受害者的视角出发，揭开跨国毒品供应链的真相，并探讨在灾难之后社会该如何复原。带您从受害者的故事看芬太尼在街头的致命危机。
在洛杉矶的游民区，空气弥漫一股难以忍受的气味。这里充满了无家者，也藏着毒品、暴力与非法活动。为了确保自身安全，记者只能暗中记录这一幕。
记者所在的位置在洛杉矶市中心，这里是全美芬太尼问题最严重的地区之一。根据我们的长期观察，在游民聚集的街头，经常可以看到有人昏迷倒地，在生死边缘挣扎。当地的社工面临极大的压力。
Last week, I reversed an overdose when I was just walking to my car, and the person, we found unresponsive on the ground. And we were able to, use Narcan, do CPR, and the person was able to, wake up. We reversed that overdose, and his phone was ringing as he was starting to wake up, and he didn't know what happened.
在纽约，不当使用芬太尼的意外时有所闻。从2019年开始，全美已有超过30万人因为过量使用芬太尼死亡。这个数字已经远超过美军在越战期间的死亡人数58000人。
在纽约的街头，人们像断线的木偶，身体弯折成不自然的角度，看起来像是站着睡着了，有时也会突然惊醒，怪异的模样，有人形容像丧尸一般。这是芬太尼，一种致命的鸦片类毒品，正以极快的速度吞噬城市的边缘人。
You might find them standing up asleep, if that makes any sense. They call it the fentanyl fold. A lot of times they'll stand up and smoke some of the fentanyl, but then they'll just kind of slowly fall asleep and they'll like bend over at the waist and they'll just kind of hang there. And
so fentanyl is a very powerful synthetic drug for treating pain. It is an opioid drug that's in the same class as morphine and heroin. It's a very potent painkiller, 50 times more potent than heroin and 100 times more potent than morphine.
正因为效果强烈且成瘾性高，毒品商经常把它做成各式各样的形态，有些掺进传统的毒品里，有些做成糖果的外形，甚至会做成和其他药品一模一样。有家长控诉他的孩子因为在街头买到伪药而丧命。
This is now my she shed, whatever you want to call it. This is where I keep, right now, a lot more Narcan than I'm used to having.
利奥波德的孩子崔佛就是吃了伪药之后不幸丧命，他保持了房间原有的样子，借此让思念有所寄托。
But I didn't know anything else I could do. We had tried talking to counselors. We had tried sending him to therapy. We had tried offering him prescription drugs that would help his anxiety, but he didn't want any of that. And he kept on using, and his actions escalated.
崔佛原本染上的毒品是大麻，后来开始自己寻找其他的药物缓解毒瘾，直到有一天在街头买到了4颗药丸。
He started experimenting with pharmaceutical pills, things that you would get from the pharmacy, like Xanax and Percocet and OxyContin. But Trevor didn't get it from the pharmacy. He and some friends bought 4 pills. They were marked as M30s, blue M30s, which is OxyContin. And he told his friend, I'm going to take the last pill. And his friend woke up next to a dead body the next day. They did not anticipate there was fentanyl in it.
在临床上作为正规药物使用的芬太尼，到底是多少剂量会导致死亡？旅美的史丹佛大学附设医院急诊科主治医师杨胜一给出了答案。
Any amount greater than 2 milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal. 2 milligrams, yeah. So the typical dose is we're talking about 25 to 100 micrograms. So it's, 2 milligrams will be 10 to 100 times more than the typical dose that we would use medically.
它最大的副作用，它会呼吸变慢，所以一般死都死在他没有呼吸，而且因为他打了以后他很舒服，他都没有感觉说我现在已经都没有呼吸了。
而另一位幸运被救回的青年寇利，在一次又一次的沉沦中，一步步踏入毒贩的芬太尼陷阱。
4 years ago, Corey has continued to struggle in his addiction, but the dealers on the street started replacing heroin with fentanyl. They slowly started adding fentanyl into the heroin because it's much cheaper and easier to get. Corey said it was unbeknownst to him that they were starting to add that, and most of the addicts didn't know they were doing that, but it ended up being completely replacing the heroin.
Most people don't go out to buy fentanyl. They may go out to buy some other drug, but it may be a painkiller, it may be some other drug, but fentanyl has saturated the whole drug market, and so it's been introduced into many other drugs because it makes them more potent, and it's very cheap to insert, and therefore there's a big interest in using fentanyl to reduce the cost of the traffickers.
芬太尼从医学临床使用的强力止痛剂，演变成街头毒贩的热门商品，且如癌症般迅速扩散。不只是美国，连加拿大也成了重灾区。各国政府不得不正视这个问题，而阻绝非法管道则成了当务之急。
杜绝芬太尼必须先找出来源。透过中央社特派记者跨国际的调查发现，背后藏着一个巨大且紧密的产业链。中央社特派记者张欣瑜、林宏汉、廖汉元、侯姿莹、陈爱芬、李登文跨国专题报道。
芬太尼之所以致命，不只是因为它的药性强、剂量小，真正让它成为灾难的是它背后那套高度工业化的生产与流通机制。这种合成毒品只靠化学原料就能在实验室大量制造，从中国出货的前驱物质经墨西哥制造转运，再进入美国市场，过程快速，成本低廉，几乎难以追踪。这条产业链上有技术、有物流、有分工，这不再只是黑帮之间的交易，更是一套成熟的跨国供应链。接下来，我们中央社特派记者团队将进一步揭秘这条跨国产业链上的运作细节，追踪它如何横跨中国、墨西哥与美国，甚至加拿大。请看特派记者的报道。
fentanyl, they put a piece, take a pin, put a little tiny piece of fentanyl on the top of that pin, and that can kill 5 people. Put a little bit more, it can kill the entire town. So we lose 300,000 people a year to drugs entering from Mexico. And if they don't stop this poison from flooding into our country, and they can stop it by not accepting it from China, and I'm doing the same thing with China, we're going to tariff the hell out of them.
芬太尼问题在美国一发不可收拾，且时间长达数年。美国总统川普在竞选时就不止一次提及，并且剑指墨西哥与中国。
I can feel another 2 or 3 in here.
More than 27,000 pounds of fentanyl, nearly double the year before, representing over 1 billion pills. Today, I am proud that CBP is launching the Plaza Spike campaign.
为了阻止芬太尼大量涌入美国本土，美国边境管制局一连串推出了阿波罗行动以及广场打击行动，查获数量庞大的芬太尼原料、成品、半成品以及制造器具。这些非法的芬太尼被藏在车子的夹层、轮胎内，甚至油箱桶里，再透过美墨边境走私进入美国。
芬太尼的跨国毒品网路大致可以分为3个部分，首先是中国的原料，再来是墨西哥制造，以及在美国的销售还有洗钱。
不止墨西哥，加拿大也多次破获非法的芬太尼超级制毒实验室。
The discovery of commercial-grade chemistry equipment at all locations, in addition to the arrest of an individual who we suspect has a background in chemistry, points to a disturbing trend of progressively enhanced scientific and technical expertise among transnational organized crime groups involved in the production and distribution of illicit drugs.
他毒枭很聪明，他也不是说从这些国家就制成芬太尼的本身这个芬太尼的毒品，他会利用先驱原料做成所谓的半成品，那再到比如说美国这些边界的国家附近的微型实验室，再加工变成真正的芬太尼之后再走私进来，它这样成本就会少很多，而且会降低它被查缉的风险。像美国政府它剑指的就是所谓的墨西哥。墨西哥，那甚至在北美的部分，他也认为加拿大的部分对这个相关的药品的管制不是很严格啦，因为这个陆路的边界来讲那个是非常绵延、非常长，你用人力多少的人力也没办法去围堵。
输送带上一件件的小包裹，里头可能含有极微量的芬太尼，专家表示实在难以查缉。
There are tens of thousands of web postings advertising fentanyl and other synthetic drugs that are available on the open web. Much of the fentanyl production is located in registered companies. Millions of packages coming into the U.S. daily. It's so difficult to find the product.
然而，在美国联邦众议院中国问题特别委员会将矛头指向中国，在一份调查报告中指出，高达97%的非法芬太尼前驱原料是由中国公司制造。
But it's undeniable that there's also a supply problem, and that the overwhelming majority of fentanyl precursor chemicals are being supplied by PRC chemical companies. Across multiple administrations, Democratic and Republican, the U.S. has requested that the CCP take action against PRC companies that export fentanyl precursors for illicit purposes. But simply put, as our bipartisan investigation shows, the CCP has not taken enough action. This lack of action is simply unacceptable.
因此，中国原料、墨西哥制造、美国销售，看似完美地的产业链尚缺最后一块的拼图，就是如何洗钱。
而这些在美国销售毒品的不法所得，他们会交给在美国的中国地下金融业者，也是我们俗称的地下钱庄。 这地下钱庄把钱借给了在美国需要现金的一些中国人，但要求他们要在中国的银行里面存入人民币，而这些犯罪集团他们就用在中国这些人民币在当地再购买了这个化学品的原料，再运回墨西哥来制造。
除了这种传统洗钱方式，中国不法业者也会透过走私昂贵的木材或野生动物以及加密货币来当成洗钱的工具。如此一来，从化学原料的输出、毒品的制造、黑市的流通到资金的洗白，一条跨越国界的犯罪链精密运作，环环相扣，构成一场横扫北美的芬太尼风暴。中央社特派记者张欣瑜、林宏汉、廖汉元、胡姿莹、陈爱芬、李登文跨国专题报道。
从原料到制造，走私贩售到跨境洗钱，毒贩利用现代物流和虚拟金融，将毒品铺向街头，再将赃款漂白送回源头，继续购买原料，再度输出死亡。这场轮回高速运转无从停歇，代价是30万条人命，远超过越战时期美军死亡人数。光是2023年，美国就痛失近8万人，经济损失高达2.7兆美元，占全国 GDP 的9.7%。面对这场国安等级的灾难，美国政府试图封锁源头，切断资金，但真正的战场也在每个人的生活里。中央社特派记者实地走访旧金山2家戒瘾机构，看见这场毒品风暴里最真实的幸存者。他们曾经坠入深渊，也曾走投无路，如今选择面对过去，重建人生。他们是在复原的证明，也是这场危机里最脆弱也最坚强的声音。芬太尼系列报道《漫长的复原之路》，带您了解美国社会如何试图走出伤痛。
I started using when I was 14 years old. I started using IV when I was 23, and that was I stopped using when I was 34. I'm 36 now. This is my room. This is my bed.
鲍恩是一名药物成瘾者，接触过多种毒品，包括芬太尼。跟许多个案一样，辗转来到这家位于旧金山的药物救助机构。
In there? I did. Yeah. I like that this is a 6-month program instead of just a 30-day, because you have time to get used to being clean, and we learn how to talk to people again. I feel safe because nobody's using here. Nobody's using here. The UA is all the time. If I weren't at Harbor Lights, I know I would still be on the streets, and it wouldn't be long. If I were still living on the streets, it wouldn't be long before I was using again, and it would just kill me.
他在这里成功摆脱毒瘾，期许能够完成学业后回到机构，帮助像他一样的人。
Hopefully, I'm going to go back to school.
You want to go back to school?
Yeah, I want to go back to school. I want to go through the culinary program because they're short-staffed on chefs here. So hopefully I can get a job as a chef in the next couple years.
And so what that looks like for us is, again, getting people off the streets in real time, bringing them into our Harbor Light Recovery Wellness Center, aka a detox, where they can stabilize and heal and address their immediate, concerns, a bath, getting some food in their belly and able to stabilize and sleep for a night. And maybe they'll continue that journey and they'll take the scary jump to go to residential treatment.
This is the women's dorm right here.
鲍恩参加的这个戒治计划分为2个阶段，第一个阶段为期6个月，从这里毕业后可以再前往下一个机构接受为期2年的协助。
Together also, so it's like a family-based thing here, where we're all family. Like he's my new founded son. But it's real cool, we have our.
琼斯是第2阶段的受助者，在这里接受为期2年的帮助。现在的他有一份不错的工作，同时也会去演讲，分享摆脱芬太尼毒害的心路历程。
I came into this program like I was so torn down that I was like 140 pounds. Gray hair, just lost, miserable, you know. And the transformation today, I'm 230 pounds. I have a good job working in detox. I just gave up a job working at Pier 41. I used to work at the Ferris wheel. I go to meetings each and every day. I have a sponsor. I speak at every meeting I can around San Francisco. In fact, I'm doing a speaker meeting on the 30th at Harbor Lights. I just enjoyed sobriety.
This would be detox for the
根据美国物质滥用及精神卫生防治局统计，全美共有近15000家治疗服务的机构，其中联邦认证的鸦片类药物治疗机构有近2000家，专门提供鸦片类药物治疗，共有数百万名的药物成瘾者获得协助。回到旧金山街头，仍有许多无家者，他们衣衫褴褛，精神恍惚，有些疑似呈现芬太尼弯折状态。这些人甚至会公然在警局门口吸食毒品。
When I first came to the city of San Francisco, and I drove down to an event, and I saw people using fentanyl with a torch and taking a pipe, and they're smoking it right on the street, you know, right? And I said, I can't believe they're smoking it right there. And then I drove by the police department, and right in front of the police department, people were openly smoking marijuana and smoking whatever that was in their pipe.
The fentanyl crisis is unlike anything most cities have seen in a very long time. You got to address it early. You got to get people into treatment early. And often you got to stand up as many mental health and drug treatment beds as possible. But I would just say go at it early and often, and don't let it overtake your community.
及早预防并且提供救助机构与床位，确实帮助了许多还在药瘾中挣扎的人们，但伤害却早已造成。摊开死亡人数统计数据，美国每年死于芬太尼危害的人数在新冠疫情期间急速攀升，每年约8万人丧命。根据白宫于2024年3月发布的报告指出，仅在2023年，非法鸦片类药物，主要是芬太尼，就导致了约2.7兆美元的经济损失，约占当年美国 GDP 的9.7%。
所以他当时透过所谓的紧急立法，所以将这个芬太尼等物质紧急列管为第一类的受控物质，等于说透过行政程序下去紧急列管。所以它目前的状态就是说，目前还是紧急列管状态，但是修法还没完成。它未来国会跟司法部门是想要将这个芬太尼列为永久立法第一级的管控物质，就是第一级毒品。
I think that there is obviously drug economies are controlled, right, by groups, affiliations, and that does have to do with immigration, at least here in San Francisco. And we're seeing that federal enforcement has actually curtailed some of the blatant drug dealing that we've seen on the street in recent months and in the past year. But I am in favor of drug enforcement, right? I think we need that. For a long time, we didn't have any in San Francisco. That does start at the federal level as people try to transport large quantities over the border.
There's just not one answer. It's a very, very complex problem, part an international trade problem, and part a domestic problem. And all of it needs to be addressed in a comprehensive strategy. You can develop a whole integrated plan, supply chain analysis, psychological support, mental health support.
布拉斯维也是接受计划协助的戒瘾者，他与琼斯一样，都曾深陷芬太尼的漩涡之中，难以自拔。现在透过心理支持、药物治疗以及生活辅导，也开启了第二人生。
This program helped me save money. I've never saved
money in my entire life. I'm 46 years old. I've never had, this is, so when I leave out of here, I'm gonna have money, I'm gonna be okay, And that's gonna help somebody else, the next person.
I know I'm not gonna use today, and maybe tomorrow will be a different story, but as long as I keep today well at hand, then I won't have to use tomorrow either. I just want to be able to stand on both my feet. I don't want to get rich. I just want to be able to make it every day.
每一位戒瘾者逐渐走出死亡边缘，重新站上人生的轨道。尽管如此，仍有太多芬太尼过量使用者没有等到明天。
When we have so much stigma attached to addiction, right? People don't want to talk about it. And so I think the public health perspective is we want to shine a light when there are things that are in the shadows. And right now addiction is in the shadows.
芬太尼自2013年开始成为药物过量死亡的主因，直到2024年死亡人数首次下降。美国对抗芬太尼的战争迎来转折，救助计划逐步奏效，但贩运的产业链还没斩断，致命危机依旧潜伏在人们看不见的角落。这场战争还没结束。中央社特派记者张欣瑜、林宏汉、廖汉元、侯姿莹、陈爱芬、李登文跨国专题报道。
芬太尼，一种药效强、剂量小却足以致命的毒品，在美国掀起一场横扫全境的社会风暴。我们从街头的致命危机出发，看见无数生命如何在转瞬之间被夺走，同时揭秘跨国产业链。最后，在漫长的复原之路，记录戒瘾者如何在崩溃之后努力站起来。这一场不容忽视的芬太尼风暴，随时可能入侵其他国家，不容忽视。中央社在全球设有34个海外驻点，我们的特派记者会持续深入世界各地，观察在地变化，追踪重大议题，带来值得信赖的第一手报道。我们也将持续推出各类型的特派专题，透过深入的采访与记录，掌握全球脉动。我是黄家华，感谢你的收看，我们下次见。